Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Welcome to Mastering the Next, a cutting-edge podcast that explores the future of graduate, online, and non-traditional education through the lens of AI and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Ray Lutsky, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Element 451. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the thought leaders shaping the future of graduate enrollment management through technology. Mastering the Next is a part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that helps institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. Welcome to today's episode, where we'll explore the future of graduate education at California State University Channel Islands. I'm honored to have Dr. Richard Yao, president of Cal State Channel Islands, with us to discuss the exciting developments and strategic initiatives shaping their graduate programs. Dr. Yao will share what's next for CSU Channel Islands and how the university is preparing students for the challenges and opportunities ahead. Dr. Yao, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thanks, Ray. Glad to be here.
So I want to start by asking what's next for Cal State Channel Islands and the area of graduate education.
Yeah, it's interesting talking about what's next because we're so young as an institution. We're only 21 years of age. We opened our doors in 2002. So obviously our primary focus historically had been at the undergraduate level. But as we continue to evolve as an institution of higher ed, graduate education really has come to the forefront of our efforts. And I think this focus in graduate education has its roots going back, I think, to our 2015 accreditation process. And one of the main recommendations in 2015 was we need to strategically expand our graduate offerings, but most importantly, in direct response to our regional needs. So, for example, here in Ventura County, we're in a hotbed, a very exciting time for biotechnology here in Ventura County. We have the largest independent biotech firm in the country right in our backyard, so many startups. So we continue to offer our Master of Science in Biotechnology and Bioinformatics with different emphases, but I get most excited about our stem cell technology emphasis, where we have students engaging in these internships on stem cell research across the state of California, including sites with Stanford and UCLA and UCSD. So that's very exciting. And also related to that, we also offer a dual degree program with a Master's of Biotechnology with an MBA. So that's kind of a unique offering that we have, where we have great demand. And also, when you think about Ventura County, people forget this. We have 3 naval bases right in our backyard. So there's a lot of workforce needs. So in terms of graduate programs, we have a Master's of Science in Computer Science and Mathematics. And I think on the undergraduate level, kind of a niche program, we have a bachelor's degree in Mechatronics Engineering. So that's very exciting. And then, of course, the regional need, I guess everywhere, not unique to Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, but education. And I always say we're a driving force within this P20 educational ecosystem. So we've offered master's degrees in education with various specializations. But more recently, talking about what's coming next, this is happening right now. We've actually prioritized new graduate programs in education that we're launching. We started this summer, and that includes our doctorate in educational leadership for equity and justice. Launched just this summer. We had 25 slots, and we had over 75 applicants. So that's unheard of for an inaugural cohort. And I think speaks to the need here regionally, but also we're offering this fall a Master of Science in School Counseling, which as a clinical psychologist, I'm very excited about that and meeting those workforce needs. And then, of course, healthcare, that's a big regional need here. We have a Master of Science in Nursing with a nurse practitioner track and nurse educator FSCs. But again, what's next moving forward? We're prioritizing, hopefully expected to launch in fall of 25, a master's degree in health administration, primarily focusing on geriatrics. So we have an aging population here in Ventura County, so to meet those needs. And then from a business and technology side, we're really going all in on business analytics and digital marketing. Both are really connected to what's happening in industry locally here, connected to AI, and drawing on our industry connections with our local partners like the Trade Desk and HubSpot. So those are what we're prioritizing, what we've had, in place, and what we're prioritizing moving forward. So very excited about that.
That is exciting. And that's a lot of STEM programs. It's sort of infused into all of the programs you're working on, given your regional impact and your partners. Thinking about technology, which is so critical for any sort of STEM collection of programs, how are you integrating technology into your graduate programs to enhance learning and engagement?
Well, it's interesting. I want to come back to what you said about STEM, right? And meeting the needs. It's interesting. I keep coming back to the evolution and development of Channel Islands. I can't help it because we're so young, and maybe because I'm a psychologist, I love development. But, initially we started out with a very liberal arts focus, early on. And then as our demographics changed, lots happened in 20 years and 21 years. And so we become more focused on career readiness and prep and more conscientious of our regional needs. And while we still offer, an array of offerings, obviously, those are some of the priorities in our region, which is why we're focused in that direction. So just a little bit of, I always like that organizational context to provide a little more depth. But in terms of technology in the graduate programs, I think, at a high level and very generally speaking, I do think we have a good technological infrastructure, first and foremost, to support students in their journey, and also looking at opportunities for enhanced engagement, both inside and outside of the classroom. So obviously, in terms of the curriculum, I think our programs have made very good use of virtual reality technology for immersive learning and simulation scenarios. And again, as a psychologist, what I do appreciate is the use of virtual reality as part of training protocols for nursing health science students to facilitate, I think we call it greater empathy, right, for patients and caregivers. And I would say also from a teacher preparation lens, our credentialing program uses virtual reality to engage in, teaching scenarios where these pre-service teachers work with avatars and can pause the simulation and consult with what they call the brain. And that's actually class peers who can provide educated and collective wisdom during the role play exercise scenario. So it's kind of real-time learning, engaging their classmates. And of course, computer science, we've been close partners with Amazon Web Services and incorporated that certification into our curriculum. And in collaboration with AWS, developing, our faculty there, Michael Soltis is fantastic, but developing AI-focused course material based on what they're calling the Harvard case study method. So each of the 15 lessons has a lab where students build various solutions. And so, there's lots of things in work, but I would say from a pedagogical perspective as well, we want to offer, what my team calls engaging and humanized learning experiences for our graduate students. So, learning engagement tools, utilizing text, voice, image, and video. And I think what I appreciate the most is the faculty support and faculty development that's so important in this work. And we provide so much guidance and support in course development, but we conceptualize it as a team endeavor, right? So you have the faculty as the teachers and subject matter experts, but we also bring in learning designers, academic technologists and specialists in inclusive design, especially, and media. So I think what we're seeing, we're moving in the direction of this team approach in terms of faculty development. And obviously that's a lift, right? There's variability in faculty's openness to this type of approach and willingness to engage. So we're trying to pilot this in pockets and be able to demonstrate through the data how this is impacting. And I think this is one example. This is more at the undergraduate level, but with our online psychology degree completion program, we looked at one of the highest DFW courses in our psych curriculum is research methods. And of course, our faculty were so concerned about how is this going to translate online. We can barely, we're struggling in person. And we had this team effort. And again, without losing any level of rigor, assessment, staying true to the outcomes assessment pieces, we flipped the script. We had the lowest DFW rates in that. And that was a turning point for our faculty to say, oh my God, this really works. And so trying to build on that type of momentum that's inherent when you see those positive outcomes.
So important to be engaging the faculty there, and they're so central to the mission and success of the students. I want to double click on something that you just mentioned, specifically around, for example, AWS and Amazon goes to great lengths to provide employee education opportunities, and thinking about degree completion program that you just mentioned. How is it different, or how are you leveraging technology to support those adult learners or non-traditional learners, or frankly, given your position within the Cal State system, underrepresented learners? Are there different ways you're leveraging technology for those populations? Does it change? I mean, you talked about the engagement level for online a bit there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In some ways, I view it similar to universal design, right? When you design things with certain populations in mind, it benefits everybody, right? It benefits everybody. So, to me, really taking a step back for a minute, I think when we talk about our students, our non-traditional and also our underrepresented students, they're the heart and soul, right, of our institutional identity. As you know, we're a proud Hispanic serving institution. 62% of our students identify as Hispanic, Latinx, and what we're most proud of, like many CSUs, but 60% of our students are first gen. So as we've evolved, like I said, our student demographic has changed over the years. So I would say, this is pretty foundational and basic, but at the most foundational level, all of our graduate programs offered at Channel Islands are flexible, online, evening or weekend, right? So there's a high level of faculty engagement while still allowing students to continue in their jobs, right? They're working sometimes 1-2 jobs and have family commitments. So that flexibility is big. And of course, for me, this is really important because we know that student success is not just about academic aptitude, but how do we embed the student support services, right? We have them in person here historically and traditionally, but how do we embed the necessary student support services within these frameworks? And we know that, this is equally important to student success and academic aptitude. So things like virtual tutoring and academic advising. As a psychologist, I love that our mental health resources, we can use them through a digital learning platform. Our IT services team, they've developed what we're calling a virtual lab space for students to access software that they'd otherwise have to pay for, like SPSS for quantitative research analysis. Our student academic success and equity initiatives team, we call them SASE, they manage what we call EchoBot, and it's a chat bot. It's award-winning, nationally recognized for personalized student support. And I think what I'm very excited about is we have a Canvas Ally tool, which is used specifically to create accessible materials for students with disabilities and mobile-friendly options. So those may not have a computer. Their primary device is a phone or a tablet. So very excited about those pieces. But also from a design perspective, I love our teaching learning innovations. It's interesting. We talk so much at higher ed about spaces that take our energy, right? And how few spaces we have that actually regenerate energy. Our TLI team, I tell you, that's just there's so much energy in that department. I don't know what they have going on there, but I want to expand that out to our campus community. But a good example, they developed a bilingual course kit in our Canvas shell for inclusive learning design. So that, features welcoming banners and messages in English and Spanish to honor our linguistic diversity and obviously promote that inclusion during our students' educational journey. We always talk about being an HSI, and being an HSI really at the most basic levels about enrolling students, but, coining a phrase from Excellency in Education, how do we leverage technology to really enact what we call servingness, right? How do we truly serve our students through learning design? So those are just a few examples that I'm pretty excited about.
I'd love to just double click on something you just mentioned around the idea of being a Hispanic serving institution in HSI and working with so many first generation students. What are you using or what strategies, what technologies are you using to recruit these students into graduate programs? I mean, clearly, as you mentioned, there are some differences when you're talking about underrepresented students, first generation students, and helping them bridge the gap to become learners, to enroll. What's going on there at Cal State Channel Islands?
Well, outside of technology, I think it's important first to really acknowledge our institutional identity. And that's really grounded in serving underrepresented groups, first generation students, flipping the scripts and family trajectories. So I think starting out with that brand awareness here locally and beyond our local region, that we're here for you. Like, this is what we do. And I think that's the foundational pieces of it. And in terms of technology, this is still evolving for us, but I would say one of our biggest efforts right now is through digital marketing. And how do we be more targeted and focused on our efforts? I was saying higher ed, I still get caught up in this. We do on our campus in various units, but I feel like we cast a broad net still, right? Let's just cast this broad net, universal broad net, and we try to see who we can engage in that process. But how do we utilize data technology to be much more targeted and focused, and where we're seeing a bigger return on our efforts? And that's part of the work. So with digital marketing, and obviously, we have some good folks with us that are experts in this, but we're trying to go beyond kind of the pay-per-click and the search and the social advertising, and really honing in on programmatic ad tech. So like the Trade Desk platform, to better reach students who are genuinely interested in pursuing their degree here at Channel Islands. So that allows us, I think, this technology to actually reach more students that are good matches, right? That are good fits for our programs. And that involves obviously this outreach, then multiple forms of communication. We're able to track data. So to evaluate our efforts, are these moving the needle, rather than before? You never know. You're doing all this advertising and you don't know if you're even having an impact. So tracking data, and of course, through this, understanding students and their career goals. So that's one aspect. And the other piece is through that admissions pipeline, right? That funnel. And through the recruiting and admissions process, I think our overarching goal, and how do we use technology to do this, is to ensure that prospective students get the information when they need it and in a timely manner. So how do we harness automations? How do we improve advising? So important, right? So how do we improve the scheduling and advising appointments and regular and consistent follow-up through that admissions process? And how do we get better data, and how do we utilize this data to refine our outreach? And I think one good example I referenced earlier in our talk here is the widely successful recruitment of our doctoral program in education. It was I was shocked. I couldn't believe for an inaugural cohort. And obviously, there's some old school strategies in it. It's not just technology, but there's some old school groundroots efforts, and it's connecting with our community partners. We know that there's a huge need. I don't know how many times you hear from superintendents and principals. We need more advanced education for our teachers, opportunities for them to grow, evolve, and move up. So first and foremost is developing those ground roots relationships, right? And putting in the time and effort there. And then using the technology and really emphasizing what we have done. And this speaks to kind of the recruitment of our underrepresented groups, but equity and justice orientation, that's the primary focus of the program. So that's going to, really attract those who are interested in it, especially those from underrepresented programs. And then things like developing informative websites for the program. And I think what's really helped is synchronous information sessions on Zoom that we advertise through community partners and our website. So I think we have a good foundation and a pilot of sorts that we've utilized with our EDD program, and hopefully we can learn from that and build on it.
Hey, it's Mallory. Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event brings together leaders, innovators, and many of your favorite Enrollify creators to explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. We're packing the schedule with real examples and case studies, so you leave knowing how to harness AI to drive meaningful change at your institution. Whether you're looking to enhance student outcomes, optimize enrollment marketing, or simply stay ahead of the curve, the AI Engage Summit is your gateway to the next level of higher education innovation. Registration is free. Visit element451.com to save your spot. Now, back to the show.
It's an impressive growth for a first year of a program, for sure. And it's a testament to the strategies and technologies you are using to bring those students into the fold. And you occupy a position within the CSU system that is enviable, in that your programs are among some of the most affordable for learners in the state. In order to ensure that ROI for those learners, how are you going about retaining those students? And I know that there's probably a combination, again, of strategy and technology here. And you talked a bit about engaging learners. But are there any other things that you're doing to sort of make sure that those students persist to graduation and get the degree they came for?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Ray. I would say coming out of COVID, we still haven't fully recovered in our retention efforts. And pre-COVID, I'll never forget, I was so excited about, I came here in 2018 and we did so much and looked at the data, and we were very targeted in our student success initiatives. And we were moving the needle. That 2019 cohort, I thought, oh my God, we had all-time highs in 1 year retention. And I said, DFW rates were low and we still had some gaps elsewhere, but I was confident we're going to pull this off. We're going to meet it. COVID hits, right? And students struggled and they're still struggling. And so for me, it's really thinking about how do we tweak the playbook, right? I'm not ready to throw out the playbook. We have decades worth of research on best practices and student success, especially for first-gen students, but how do we tweak it? And that's evolving. And I think that's where technology, plays a part in this. And obviously retention for graduate versus undergraduate is very different, right? The retention for graduate students are really high, undergrad's different. So I think it starts, and obviously as president, I feel strongly about this, maybe a little bit biased, but I think that it starts with a commitment to equity from senior leadership, like clear, explicit, right? Communicating our goals for equitable student outcomes, prioritizing diverse student needs, closing those equity gaps. And then I think ensuring that our primary efforts and some examples, our first year experience, enhanced scholarship support, learning communities. We're now utilizing embedded peer-to-peer academic support, kind of a combo of supplemental instruction, peer-based student learning, this hybrid model, but we're embedding that in all sections. We're trying almost all sections of college level math and English. Those are our gateway courses, right? And summer success academy. So how do we take aspects of this work that are in person and how do we translate that virtually or within digital platforms? So, for me, it's interesting. We have things like early alert that we're using. That's nothing new, but we're implementing that. AI-based chatbot. We have the Echo bot, but we're moving into an evolved version of that provides those initial levels of support for students and allows us to better listen to their voices in these online programs. So, we're going to be sending targeted messages focusing on well-being, academic success, to proactively then use that as the initial layer of assessment. Okay, what were the needs and how do we bridge it from there? But this is the one thing I'm really interested in. I don't have the answer, and I'd love to listen to more of your podcast to see if I can learn more. But, everyone's talking about the digital experience for students, the user experience. And it's interesting, a lot of the conversation is focused on convenience for students as well as belonging. And I've been a part of a lot of discussions externally, internally, within the system, outside the system. And the focus really is on the digital experience in terms of convenience. So things like the universal ID and things like that. But it's a good way to track data, by the way, right? To use that. But for me, I think the underlying assumption, which I'm not totally sold on yet, is that by enhancing digital experience for convenience purposes for students, it somehow is congruent or in alignment with building belonging. I'm not sure about that yet, right? So my thing is interesting. I talked about student success. I'm coming out of COVID. I remember meeting with focus groups of sorts with our learning community students, and these students have the most wraparound support built in. And they were talking about how they were feeling isolated and alone. And it scared me to death because I thought, my God, all of you have the most resources available. How must the students be faring who don't have this level of support? And it came back to belonging. And so I'm really curious about how to utilize the digital platforms, not only for convenience, but to genuinely promote belonging and being able to track the data. I think one of the things we've been looking at is the near-peer platform in the admissions cycle. When we admit students, they're part of this near-peer app. And part of that is building, it's a social media app, basically, and they're building connections before they're even accepting their admittance. But they're admitted, and they build these communities. And then by the time orientation rolls around, they're feeling a part of the campus community already, right? And then after they're here, do they even need that anymore because they have their built-in community? So we're in the process of implementing that. I know CSUN has utilized that framework, and I've talked with President Beck, they're my colleague, and they've been able to move the needle on many fronts. And I think that's one example where we have data to support the belonging pieces. And I'm just curious to see what else is out there and what evolves to build that sense of belonging, because it's so important for our first-gen students and those from underrepresented groups.
I have to dig in because it's such an important topic and go a little bit off script and just ask. We've talked about diversity, we've talked about equity, we've talked about belonging, and there's a national dialogue happening right now around public education and diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do you view that dialogue? Where do you feel like that's going? I just would love to hear your perspective.
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you asked that. We can maybe do another separate podcast on all of this. That's
Sure.
another thing. But it's interesting. And I'll be fully honest and transparent, Ray. Obviously, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, that's the forefront of my leadership. That's the forefront of the CSU Channel Islands. It's the forefront, I think, of what higher ed's all about. And so it's interesting for me when thinking about all the momentum we had back in 2020, the Black Lives Matter movement, so much momentum worldwide. And I was really anticipating progress. I was anticipating anti-racist legislation, right? And all these things. And I was excited and engaging in this work. But what have we seen over the last couple of years, right? We're seeing legislatures determine what can and can't be taught in the classrooms. And we're seeing, backlash, and not even just proposed legislation, but legislation that is in direct opposition to what we're doing. So we're seeing this increased resistance. And I'll be honest, Ray, I'm a data guy. I love outcomes, right? And I've talked to my colleagues about this, and there's mixed reviews. There's a lot of variability. But for me, it makes me not question the values, but question our methodology. Are we going about this work the right way? Because I'm not seeing the outcomes that I want to see, right? And so a good example is in California, state of California, we used to have a travel ban on travel to states that were passing anti-LGBTQ trans legislation. Last year, we had to give it up because there were so many states, and it's like we just threw in the towel. So yeah, all right, we have to travel there. We have to conduct business. Those are not the outcomes that I want to see. And so for me, it's interesting as a clinical psychologist, I've always been trained within the orientation of stages of change model, motivational interviewing, the idea that before concrete change happens, there's a lot of cognitive work that occurs. So you may not see overt behavior change, but you can tell that cognitive work is happening before you see that behavior change. And I've always debated, I get pushback on this a lot, Ray, whether or not that also applies to organizations and systems. I believe it does. And I don't have any data to support that. That's just anecdotal based on my clinical history. But for me, the dilemma is this, and I tell you where I used to be and where I evolved to and where I'm headed, which is still in flux. I always used to believe in that stages of change model. And the key to that was, how do you match intervention with where the person or organization is on that continuum stage? So if they're still in the pre-contemplation stage where, hey, we're good, we don't need to make any changes, and we're coming at to them with an intervention at the policy level or even at the individual level of major change, you're going to see more resistance. So the way that approach was, you got to match the intervention with the stage of change, and that's what facilitates movement. Otherwise, it creates more resistance. But at the same time, over the years, I've talked to colleagues, I've talked to friends, family members who say to me, Rich, you're crazy. We've been meeting people and organizations where they are for decades. That's got us nowhere. We're going to be unapologetic, in your face, and explicit about our work. And they're going to have to deal with it. Either they're getting on the bus or they're off the bus, right? It doesn't matter. And so for me, I was leaning in that direction. I really was over the last few years, and I was supporting that. But when I look at the outcomes, it makes me think, how do we find a middle ground here, both at the policy level? I would say the policy level, you still got to go forth with it. But where you can move the needle is at the individual level, because it's the individuals who have to implement the policy in the spirit in which the policy is developed. So there's a lot to unpack there, Ray. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent there, but that's an area that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, and how do we move it forward? And coming back to this, maybe how does technology play a role with that? That's a big part of it as well.
And I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, because it is a conversation I think a lot of folks are having in the leadership level of their institution. And I think there is this national dialogue happening. So really thank you for that. Coming to the end of our discussion, use your presidential crystal ball for us, if you will, and maybe tell us, where do you think this is all going? How do you see technology playing a role in graduate education in the future, especially at public institutions?
Yeah, it's hard because the technology is evolving so quickly. right? So right when you think you got a handle on it, there's new things coming. So I would say at a very high level, I want to view it, and the campus community wants to view technology adoption really as being tied to this overarching approach of how do we streamline the user experience for staff and faculty. I think a good example is what lessons can we learn from this example? But you think about when we moved to cloud infrastructure, it really changed the way IT interacted with our technology. So they didn't have to manage a server for each app or tool. But what happened was it led to this proliferation of applications that we adopted to solve each individual challenge, right? So these different things happening in pockets. We weren't considering how all of those individual tools fit together to impact the overarching user experience. So I think the next phase of technology adoption for our campus really should be 100% focused on the student, staff, and faculty experience and taking a holistic approach. I think that's informed by the end user. And I think obviously in terms of emerging technologies, are the various applications of generative artificial intelligence in search and content creation. And so for me, I think, how do we leverage this technology? I guess there's three main buckets for me. And one is, it comes back to the students, right? Student learning outcomes. How do we embed this into curriculum so that our students are well prepared to enter the workforce with a leg up, or even not maybe a leg up at that point, but just a baseline competency level to use these tools? And as you know, student learning outcomes are, that's the purview of the faculty. We have to ensure that faculty are embedding this career readiness into the student learning outcomes. And then, of course, on the student side, how can we work with students on how to utilize things in ethical ways, understanding their strengths and limitations? And I think for me as president, these are all important, but I think most important right now, especially as we navigate budget, staff, resizing, all of these things, is how can we utilize AI to support our faculty, staff, and administrators and create capacity, right? There's so much work to do. The enrollment challenge we're facing, the budget outlook, but as you know, the work still has to get done. And so if we're able to use AI technology to help with that workload, to actually create capacity for the staff, more time to address those other areas of need, like how do we embed it in the learning outcomes and curriculum, I think that ultimately benefits our students. So, I would say, generally speaking, things are moving fast, but related to what I was saying, our goal is not just about implementation, but how do we, in a very conscientious way, engage and take a deeper dive and exploration into the technologies. I've worked with some of our faculty, primarily from business and economics, our staff from teaching and learning innovations and IT. But how do we focus not only on implementation, but how do we engage in a broader dialogue about the questions about AI strengths and weaknesses, right? So, limitations as to what it can find historically, which can draw, biases, right, along several metrics. Let's have a discussion about the ethics involved with privacy concerns and academic integrity. So I want to move beyond implementation and take a deeper dive with a little bit more heart, a little more depth, to take a deeper dive into these things that I think require equal attention in our work moving forward. So excited. And I don't want to spend, I don't want to be the typical, academic, right, who gets caught up in these philosophical discussions at the expense of actually moving things forward. But I do think those ethical discussions and limitations and strengths will add more to our implementation as things roll out.
No, it's important, that human touch and that human heart involved in all of this. And I think we definitely have to come back, because this has been an incredible conversation. And I know we could talk even more about your insights. Dr. Richard Yao, president of Cal State Channel Islands, thank you so much for being with us.
No, this is great, Ray. I'd love to come back and take a deeper dive in those other areas we shared. So.
The Mastering the Next podcast is a part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea, and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Artis Cadieux, J.C. Bonilla, Mallory Wilsey, Brendan Henkel, Brian Gross, and so many other of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.